There's a book. It's a phenomenal book. It was published, I'd say about 45 years ago by Feldheim Publishing Company. It's called All for the Boss. There was a man, his name was Mr. Herman, and he came to the United States. He was, as a boy, from Lithuania. And there wasn't much Jewish education in those years. But he came from an observant family, and he became a wealthy man. And he was a furrier. And he said, regardless, all for the boss. He used to refer to God as the boss. Regardless of what happened, he would never, ever compromise. And in the 40s and 30s, 2nd Avenue, Manhattan, there were pushcart peddlers. And most of them were Jews. And Shabbos was a very financially important day. So they were all out in droves with their pushcarts, selling their wares. He would go and he would say to each one of them, how much do you make on Shabbos? What are your profits? And they would tell him, he says, I will pay you whatever profit you make, that you should not work on Shabbos. People looked like there was something wrong with him. At first, they didn't take him seriously. And gradually, he made a tremendous dent that these people who violated the Shabbos, they stopped violating the Shabbos. They said, look, if he's paying us for whatever profits we're able to make, we're not working. And then he would invite them. He would have at his table every Shabbos, he would have 30, 40 people. He'd invite these people, and they never had any exposure to what it meant to observe a Shabbos and how to celebrate a Shabbos. And gradually, he had a following. And he wasn't a rabbi, but he was a Jew who said, it's all for the boss. Whatever the boss wants. He would go to Coney Island in the 30s with a sign, even though in those years, modesty was at a different level than it is today. And because men and women, they would bathe, and most of the people were Jews, and he would go with the sign, which big signs, placards about what's permitted, they should not bathe on Shabbos, whatever it was, didn't make a difference. And they would castigate him, and they would say the man, there's something wrong with him. He wasn't deterred. They'd pick him up and throw him out. It's all for the boss. And that's the book. It's a very interesting book to read. And all the rabbis, the great sages from Europe who came to visit America, he was the home. He was the address. He would host all these rabbis. And he raised a family where his children understood that they never slept in their own beds, because their bedrooms were always given for some guest visiting the home. That's the way they were raised. And that's the way he lived his life. Everything, it's all for the boss. So again, it's a perspective and it's a conditioning. It's not easy. But factually, if a person begins and he chips away at it, and you assume a natural conditioning to that, over time, what happens? You don't even attend that meeting where you know ultimately it's going to end up that, so you don't have to contend with all these issues. But if you find yourself in that situation, as a result of that, a person will be able to deal with it. I'll give you an example. People travel. And a person who's always put on tefillin throughout his life, never missed, even on an airplane, it's irrelevant what people think, you're putting on your tefillin. They'll look at you like you're a man from Mars. It doesn't make a difference. A person who has missed or is a newcomer to tefillin, he'd say, you know something, this one time I think I'm going to pass. And we're speaking about by the time he lands, it's going to be too late to put on tefillin. He has much more difficult. He has to contend with this issue. The one who never missed it, he'll put it on regardless. The struggle is not as much of a struggle. But the other person, it's much more a struggle. I'll tell you a personal story. There's a certain person who was raised observant, and he gave it all up. And his children were alienated from Judaism because he didn't live a Jewish life, didn't put on tefillin, although he was raised with it, and so on and so forth. So I said to him, don't you realize you're a fool? I said, do you want your daughters to marry out? He says, no. I said, but you realize if you don't show them what it means to be a Jew, you're going to be the cause of them marrying out. Because based on the trend of society, unless a person has a sense of his Judaism, he meets a nice person, she's going to marry them. So he says, well, I take responsibility. I said, you're a fool. What do you take responsibility? You want your daughters to marry Jews, but if they should marry out, you take responsibility. I said, you're totally irresponsible. What do you mean you take responsibility? If it's something you recognize is wrong, so by not behaving properly, you're taking responsibility because you're irresponsible. I said, you're not talking about like an intelligent, rational person. So I said, so he says, what should I do? I said, make a commitment that you're going to put on tefillin every single day. Every day of the week, never ever to miss. And your children, your daughters, they're already teenagers. They should know your commitment. That's what I want. He says, well, every Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I walk 3 miles to go to an Orthodox shul, although during the year, I drive to Reform Temple, whatever it is. I said, it's irrelevant. You have to wear tefillin every day. So he tells me, he calls me up, that he was in New Mexico for a business meeting. And he remembered he did not put on tefillin that day. And he knew he had to put on tefillin before sundown. He drove 90 miles to get to his hotel where he was staying to make sure he put on those tefillin before sundown. Because he made the commitment, he was not going to miss it. Once he made that commitment, he's bound to that commitment, regardless of how difficult it is. Because he knew once he breaks it, it's over. And since then, he's never ever missed. We're talking about now a good 15 years. He hasn't missed tefillin for that reason. He made the commitment. It's not easy. You to put it on, pass up this one, drive 90 miles, and maybe miss a flight back to New York. He drove. So again, Lefum Tzara Agro. His level of dedication is greater than, I'll tell you another story, very interesting story. This has to do with a Yad Avram person. I can't divulge the name. Many years ago, this person was a managing director in a certain major financial institution. And the company was sold to a larger company. And they were going to have, they were going to greet the new chairman of the board Saturday night. And they would have working sessions all Saturday to prepare to welcome the new chairman of the board. And he was a managing director in this company. And one of his superiors called him up. He says, I know you're an Orthodox Jew. You better be there on Saturday for these working sessions. So when he said that to him, this person who's about tshuva thinks to himself, this man's not going to dictate my life and tell me how to be a Jew and how not to be a Jew. So he did immediately. The counsel in the company was an observant Jew, was always observant. And he called him. He says, look, I'm telling you, I'm not coming. I'm not coming to this working meeting under any circumstance. I'm not coming. So the one who had seniority at the company says to him, look, since I'm senior to you, let me first tell them that I'm not coming, and then you could tell them you're not coming. At least give me the first rights on that. He's no problem. And then afterwards, he ordered, of course, they ordered kosher. So he had written a letter to the new chairman of the board to tell him why he wasn't there. And he says to him, the chairman of the board, it happened to be Sandy Weil, he said to him, he says, I'm proud to have such employees that they don't put the money before their religion. Because I know only that kind of employee has a true level of dedication. You're a person of integrity and quality. That's what he said to him. But again, so when he shared it with me, this person that he wasn't going, I said, there are ways that he could have worked it out. It was within walking distance. He didn't have to write. He could have just participated. He said, no, going there is contrary to where I should be on Shabbos. I am not going. Another person who may have been observant all his life and he wants to make the glory and the finances, he would have said, we could somehow work it out. I'll speak to my rabbi. He'll tell me how to work it out. This person wasn't interested in working it out because he knew he sacrificed to arrive where he was at. And because all the sacrifices he made in his life, he wasn't willing now to compromise on those sacrifices. And therefore he says, it's not something which is right. I'm not looking for legal loopholes to be there. And he did not. And ultimately, he came out even higher and more respected because of his level of integrity and his commitment to his Judaism.